Thank you so much, Angel. I am so excited to share this with everyone attending this wonderful conference. Please don't hesitate to send messages, reach out to the organizers, and we will get your questions answered. If there's not time here, I will absolutely be happy to follow up with you later and make sure you get the information or the insights that you might be curious about. I also encourage you to screenshot this. You can request the presentation later. Share your questions on LinkedIn, and I'm sure there are lots of us that would be happy to see what you think about it and continue the conversation off the conference platform as well. So, as Angel mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Jennings. I'm with Venture Atlas Labs and SWAN Impact Network. With Venture Atlas Labs, we work on the commercialization side with venture capitalists, private equity group, corporate ventures, all of these financial and capital institutions that have resources to help new enterprises, new groundbreaking technologies be realized. And what we do on that front is help them figure out how to commercialize that in the US. What does that look like in terms of business model or pricing, or how any of the new feature sets can be added in while maintaining their runway and their time to market. So it's very complicated. We look at how fundraising affects the actual commercial decisions, how those commercial decisions can move upstream when you're looking at fundraising something new. If you're thinking about going to your bridge round or your Series A, this presentation will be very helpful for you because I am speaking in that space where many new entrepreneurs, maybe you're already revenue positive if you're in digital health, maybe you are 6-9 months, a year away from FDA approval of medical devices. I also am with SWAN Impact Network, which I'll speak to in a couple of different places here. But through SWAN, as you have heard, it is an angel network. So that means that we're looking at a different check size and a different stage of venture. So in this presentation, be aware that I'm speaking to pretty much everything before Series B, why it matters for you if you are fundraising, if you are an investor and you are looking at what the changes are and what someone else may think about that. This is the presentation for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And please let me know if you cannot see this. Someone ping me. So we're going to talk very quickly about the high points of what you need to know if you are fundraising or you are continuing to lead deals. As I mentioned, I'm from Venture Atlas Labs, so we're working with the later stage investors across health tech and life science, and with SWAN, the Angel Network. Okay, so if you're fundraising, you really have a good grasp that every time you open up a new round, if you're commercializing something before you open up your next round, you have it in the back of your mind that there really is no situation that you can't make worse. You can bring on fantastic investors, but you can also bring on terrible investors that suck and drain the life force out of your new enterprise. Now, the majority of investors you will encounter are well aware of this. They want to be better. They want to add additionality to your business. And we're going to talk about how that matters and how the economic environment that we're currently in, leading on the other side of COVID, hopefully, has affected your ability to negotiate, the way you may present your company, the way you may consider presenting risks in your company as you are looking at the investment landscape. So I'm going to duck out real quickly just to make sure that we have no technical difficulties. Okay, excellent. So let us proceed. So everything that I'm about to speak to is really critical if you are thinking about fundraising or you're in that seed, little post family and friends, seed to Series A phase. So I'm not just going to give you market information or capital information. We're going to talk about what's happening and why it matters. The angel deals are getting higher in quantity, they are getting higher in valuation, and they are getting higher in check size. So what that means is that we're getting more and more blurred. If you are fundraising a certain amount in healthcare, you are looking at a larger check size than you would just in general technology. You are looking at generally a longer time to market. You have your risk front loaded on the commercialization cycle. And don't worry, I will get into that in just a minute, why it matters. But this is getting more blurred. So if you were 10 years ago looking for your Series A, you certainly would have gone just to venture capitalists, hopefully specialist venture capitalists, who deeply understood the nuances and complexities of health tech deals. Digital health is a very complicated thing, and while there's many different nuances that may be important and shared with other technologies, maybe you don't come from the healthcare space and you've seen how we could apply something to revolutionize healthcare, it's still important on the business side, which influences heavily your finances and the way investors look at finances, that they understand those may be hurdles, they may be obstacles, they may be unfair advantages that you have, but healthcare will certainly put this in a different perspective. Now, like I said, 10 years ago, you definitely would have only looked at venture capitalists, maybe a few angels if they were follow-on investors from your previous round. But now this is getting more and more blurred, and this was really accelerated by the pandemic. There were many forces that were already underway before this happened, but the pandemic really accelerated that, and there's several reasons for that. One of those is that we learned very quickly we were going to have to figure out how to do due diligence virtually. And many organizations, many funds had it in their mandates that they had to visit in person, and this became very difficult last year. So we're looking at a wider geography than previous. And you see this replicated across many different funds between seed and Series A, where they are looking at a much larger spectrum of potential deals than those that may have been in a geography they served well or geography they knew and flew to frequently. This is shifting up earlier in the life cycle. So what that means is that if you are fundraising, there is an increased expectation that you will fundraise more earlier on than you would have previously. Now, if you're thinking about how you are leading your commercial organization, this is really critical because it means you have the potential for giving away more of your company and accepting more of that risk based on the milestones you believe you have. So for instance, you may say, I am willing to give up a larger share of the stock pool that I have, the equity in my company, because I know I can get a bigger advantage being a market leader, first to market, making these changes quicker by this time. So everything you need to look at in here is where you put that risk in your fundraise, what you're willing to accept, what those finances look like over time. Everything is over time. So when you see the expectation trend towards larger deal size earlier on, it is an attempt to accelerate the market, and you're seeing this on both sides, to move you to market quicker. Of course, if you're thinking about things like telehealth, I'd like to include, you certainly have seen a great acceleration of the market being more quickly accepting of these technologies because of the pandemic. I think that has somewhat skewed the numbers. If you are in medical devices or IoT, or you have a digital integration into another product, you may not have seen quite the acceleration as you would have had with something like telehealth or remote monitoring, for instance. So we are seeing more within SWAN, more deals, larger deals. We have more angels. So I mentioned that we are one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing, social impact-led angel network in the United States. And as a result, we've doubled our number of angels over the last year, and we'll probably continue that trend into the foreseeable future. And as a result, you can see that our dollar value and our number of entities is continuing to pace along with the industry standard in early stage investing. So as I mentioned, a lot of these are growing, which means you may have the ability to fundraise more earlier on with a higher risk quotient than you might have been before the pandemic. Like I said, I'm not going to walk through all this text because I want to make sure that we have time for questions, but please screenshot this or request the presentation afterwards, and I'm happy to share it with you. You see other trends that are really affecting the way we are looking at deals. So we will get many deals again from venture capitalists and from Angel Network, and look at how does this fit into the portfolio that we are attempting to lead. With the Angel Network, you're looking at advocating on behalf of the stakeholders in the organization, in other words, our investors, who each have their own portfolios, or you are looking for the fund, what their portfolio looks like. And looking at those contextual makeups, you start to see how these are have potential fits, how they have potential risks that overlap, and that makes it desirable or undesirable within the portfolio. So as we see the pandemic sort of start to wind down in some areas, still rolling through others, we've seen a huge shift in labor. So if you're looking at your team construct and you keep getting feedback from investors that, hey, you really need someone who has deep expertise in medical device sales, or a chief commercialization officer, or we'd really like you to have someone else who's good at finance. You have a much better chance in this current environment in recruiting someone from a large corporation who has some of that brand name recognition that may help offset some of the risks that you may be hearing from investors. And that's one of the biggest driving forces in how we are seeing the valuation and a team analysis and due diligence change. And this is really important. So we're going to go into some practical steps in just a moment of what you do about all of this. But here's something that you need to keep in mind as you are having conversations with investors. You may be starting earlier conversations and you're not quite ready to fundraise. You may be actively, knocking down doors and getting boardroom meetings, virtual conversations. The more they are seeing higher activity and higher valuations, the more competition there is from investor networks, investment funds, private equity, anyone who is writing a check. There's more competition between them right now. And that is fantastic for you. At the beginning of the pandemic, we saw the pendulum swing in favor of the investors because many of us were triaging different companies and seeing, do they need additional funding to make it through this pandemic? Do they need other resources that will help make them more resilient and protect our investment, protect the company, protect the product in these challenging times? And so new deals were really getting manipulated by investors towards, hey, we're going to negotiate harder for better terms, for most favored nation clauses, for different types of checks and different types of tranches. Now it's swung back a little bit more in the entrepreneur's favor and those who are fundraising, simply because there's more competition. The reason why that's actually critical for you is that good venture capitalists want to help you. They're not in this just to make money. They do care about the multiples, and we'll go through that in a second, but they also want to add that critical additionality that I mentioned earlier. They want to help you do more than what another fund could do. And so those are portfolio services like my company, Venture Atlas Labs. That's market research, that's pricing, that's introductions through their Rolodex. They understand how to make you more successful. And because they believe that they can help add that additionality to your company better than someone else could, they are more willing to take on risk than they might have been before the pandemic. Okay, so what does this mean? If you're in the current stage of fundraising that I suspect that you may be, you're between friends and family, you're in angels, you may be doing some SBIR grants, NIH grants, you're looking at non-dilutive funding of different persuasions in that category, and you may be moving up to venture capital. Now, if you look at the dollar figures here, this is kind of important because you want this to snowball forward. So I have been speaking very heavily to these middle two columns here, but it is a fantastic indicator if you can get follow-on funding from your angels who helped you early on in your seed raise as you start raising towards your first Series A. Okay, so here's what to emphasize if you are currently entering the market environment for your first fundraise. We need to talk about how you win on your risks. So many times you have a fantastic company, you have a fantastic idea, you are world-breakingly clever, and I mean that genuinely, you are, and the investors recognize that. That's not the problem. We want to know how you're going to win on these risks because there's always risks in the market. We want to know how you make decisions and how you're evaluating a moving landscape because it is always changing. We want to know how you're going to work with your team. How are you going to make decisions? How are you going to handle friction? Do you have rules in which you understand commonly, this is how we're going to say, this is a bad decision. You made a huge mistake with this. That's okay. We have new information now, and this is how we're going to move forward. Your investors want to know how you engage, and they want to know how you're going to fit for them. You're not just a vehicle for money, you're a lot more than that. So showing that is very critical. We're going to walk through this very quickly. So my first guideline. All of this is going to be summed up in a couple of guidelines and one rule, so please stay tuned, and why this matters. Risk aversion is less relevant when you show your work. If you take one thing away from this entire talk, it is show your work to your investors. So exactly what does that mean? So I keep saying that the investors do not just care about your company being a vehicle for these multiples. They do care about that a lot, but they want to be in the business that you are in. If you are not just a technology, you are a business. Many times you may get feedback if you are early on that you have built a product, a technology, a tool, but you have not built a business around that. And that comes from the deep understanding of, again, money, time, market share, the consequences for those things, and the rest of the business mechanics that go into understanding how your runway progresses and how you can actually fully commercialize something. That is the business portion. The investors are looking at where are their risks in that commercial process, along with where is their money in that commercial process. So when I say risk, they're looking at, hey, 2 years from now, we're still going to be working with this team, and they are completely underwater. But that's to be expected because that's the name of the game. 4 years down the road, they're making progress. They just got FDA approval, and this is what's happening. They're looking at that time. Does that fit with their portfolio? Does that fit with their strategy? And how can we help them expedite that or make stronger decisions so that in 10 years we make tons of money and we've changed the name of the game? So they care about when, they care about how, and they care about how we're going to make decisions along the way, because we are looking at a long risk threshold to actually get to market. So if you were to think about where all of that risk lies, I've hinted at it a couple of places, so I'm guessing you can guess what I think. Usually it's not the technology, usually it's not the team, usually, and by usually I mean almost always, it's because of failure to find out who is going to buy this and how they are going to buy this. If you have a new product that is not a direct-to-consumer product, that is a digital health product or a medical device or another device that will go into operating room, surgical theater, waiting rooms, a healthcare facility of any kind, you will probably encounter a huge range of different types of procurement organizations, of fractionalized services that go along with different facility types and the way budgets are cut. Rarely is it as simple or linear as you may think. In fact, you may get a lot of early feedback that you will present to your investors saying, hey, all of these doctors love this device. We spoke with 100 of them, and 98 of them said they loved it immediately. But if the doctor who you spoke to is not writing the check, unfortunately, that does not matter. Or if there's other barriers through value analysis committees or IDNs that may have a lot of purchasing power, if it is something that competes with commoditized products and you're competing at a higher price point, you may run across group purchasing organizations that will also make your life very difficult. So navigating all of that is really where your time to revenue slows down. And of course, that's exactly when your investors are hoping that you will give their money back. That's what I'm talking about when I say the risk in these healthcare technologies is front-loaded around the beginning of that commercialization cycle. Okay, I'm going to take one moment to pop out, see if we have any fantastic questions. Okay, no questions yet. Excellent. I will continue on again. Please drop us a note on LinkedIn, drop something in the chat, and I'm happy to continue to discuss with this, excuse me, later on. Okay, so you have your front-loaded risks. That is the nature of healthcare. It is okay to have risk. It is okay to not know how you are going to navigate value-based healthcare and how that may affect your pricing or your true valuation in the market. That is fine. What you need to know is how to build in a methodology within your organization about how you're going to address those risks. So we're going to walk you through some practical steps in just a moment, but what you will create, and this is why it's worth doing this, no one wants to have to clean their house, but you have to clean your house before you invite guests over, unless I suppose it's your mother. When you do this, you are cleaning your house and you are creating a body of demonstrable decision-making criteria. That is the result of this. Not only does it help you clarify where maybe some of your gaps are and your assumptions in your organization, it helps your investors come out of the unknown mindset and really understand, hey, if something world-changing happens like a global pandemic, these guys know how they're going to make these decisions. They know they can pivot into adding a service on. They know they can sell this to the government. They know they can bring together a lighter consumer product and still get some earlier revenue, because they know when they're going to make that call. They know what that criteria looks like to make that call. And I'm not as scared in that unknown mindset. I understand how we may be able to win on those risks. So this is how you're going to do this. You can do this in the back of a cocktail napkin. You can do this in a spreadsheet. You can do this on whatever platform you like. I highly encourage that you bring in your critical team members with different perspectives. Bring in your chief technology officer, bring in your digital team, bring in someone in your downstream marketing and upstream marketing, and have them do this by themselves and then collaborate. The reason why is you need to have those different perspectives to make sure that you look all around you in your organization, because you have to move seamlessly together, being a nimble startup or a new venture. You're going to create a post-mortem. So what I would like you to build is the permutations through your commercialization cycle and what might happen. Now this gets very interesting if you have any interest in statistics or regression analysis or any of those fun things. But right now we're just going to guess. This is really interesting. So what is going to kill you next? What is your post-mortem for this venture? Is it we really don't know actually how to sell this, or we got great traction in Europe, but the American healthcare system is not like ours. Or it could be just that there's more fragmentation or more cohesion, or whatever thing that you honestly think may be the final straw. If anything's going to kill your company, it's going to be this. And move one step back. Build out your minimum viable consideration. So this is a thought experiment. This isn't actual market research. This will help guide where maybe you need market research. Use Fermi estimation. So build out, okay, our next step is going to be this. Before that, we need to do that. Before that, we need to do this. So you're building out backwards your permutations of where you think something may go wrong, so you can see where it may go right and what this may look like. Now this turns out to be very interesting. If you have, let's say, 10 different permutations until you actually get to market. We need to build up this new feature set, and we're going to raise this much money because it's going to take us this long. I need to pay my developers this much. That's one decision gate. You know, do you change that feature set? Do you increase that feature set? Is it worth it? And you work backwards and you will start to see something really interesting. So let's say you had 10. If you had 10 neat steps and you're working in a vacuum in this thought experiment, and you said, you know what, I have a 90% chance of winning on each of these risks. You know, the developers are going to do a great job. My marketing team's going to be a great job. We're going to get these key opinion leaders on board. We're going to go get this pilot within this organization. Everything, 90% chance. You still, at the end of that chain, mathematically, only have a 35% chance of winning on all 10 of those risks as you assume. And this is the way investors may not build it out mathematically always, but they will look at this and say, wow, these guys are really confident, but the actual aggregate of them getting to the point where they can return our money, it's not actually that great. So they're going to need additional resources. We're going to need to talk about challenging this. We're going to need to help them get that above 90% across the board. When you're thinking about your product, your company, across the board, so you're looking at the sales and commercial side, you're looking at pricing, your assumptions with value-based care, or the let's say reimbursement strategy that you have. If you're looking at how you're presenting this to the FDA, over and over and over again, as you look all the way around your company, I love this quote from Jason Fried. If you start at the epicenter and if you take it away, what is left? And as you're thinking through this, you will build out how you're going to make those decisions, like, oh my gosh, that's actually really, really critical. Now that I sketched this out on paper, you will be prepared to know how to discuss that with investors as they go through due diligence or even your earlier stage conversations. These tests will be very, very helpful, and because those investors are going to challenge you on it. And I can't emphasize this enough. If an investor comes to you and says, we love all of this, but there is no way you're going to be able to sell this into a hospital right now, don't argue with them. Say, here's what we've done so far to educate ourselves on what needs to come next. We agree it's tough, but we believe we can win on how difficult that is. We believe we know it's risky. We're in this to change something. This isn't easy. It's disruptive. It's never been done before. We need to upseat some incumbents. We need to watch for copycats. I completely agree. But here's how I think we can win on it. And show them your work. Show them how you make decisions and say, you know what? If we lose our IP because our manufacturer isn't honest, we have another one over here and we actually have this with an international patent. We're confident that we can defend this. walk with them about how you make those decisions, how you're going to continually test that. Don't rely on information that was 5 years ago. You've all seen how quickly the world can change. And discuss how you're going to continually mitigate each of those concerns collectively alongside them. Run this in the real world. I highly encourage you, if you are in charge of your organization and you are in a boardroom with investors, potential partners, those who may help your pilot come to life in the real world, I highly encourage you to have someone else in the boardroom with you, virtual meeting, whatever you may have, who will listen to the spaces between objections, who is making their objections, what their role is, and how they engage your response, because that information will put it in the real world body of evidence around they are looking at your decision-making criteria and how this can work for them. Okay, going to pop out very quickly to check for any questions. Excellent. Okay, let's jump right back in. Okay, so I hope that at this point you have an idea that perhaps sitting down, working through these commercialization scenarios and assigning some risks to them, assigning probabilities to them, is a useful thought experiment for creating that body of decision-making criteria. I assure you it is a much more engaging conversation with your critical stakeholders, whether those are investors or those are potential partners, because your potential partners do not want you to go out of business either. They are engaged in your success. So let's talk about another kind of risk. Oftentimes, one of your biggest risks is you're running out of runway because the sales cadence is way too slow. It takes a long time to get to market, and then it takes a long time between touch points to actually develop these relationships, to navigate those value analysis committees, to navigate getting paid pilots turned into recurring revenue. These can be really, really challenging areas, and it's a continually moving game. That in market validation, if you do not yet have concrete, trusted, tested, provable commercial traction, one of the best things that you can do if you are looking at the end of this runway and your investors are not cooperating the way you would like them to, is to sell something to someone who can. So if you are a digital health startup, for instance, maybe you have created a data lake, maybe you have training data. If you are in AI, maybe you have other resources that you have created alongside, methodologies, processes. There are often things that you could then build out of that. You could sell that as a partnership, you could license that. There are many research organizations who might find that valuable. Or you could develop a lighter commercial product and sell that to consumers. You could look through many different programs that I'm happy to share with you, in which you can sell this to the American government and our allies as a pre-FDA product. There are many different ways of building out a revenue stream, but keep this in mind if the pushback you are getting from investors is, well, I really like this, but we would love to hear from you when you are already making revenue. Well, that's very tough, right? So if you are stuck in that place, think very seriously what point in time you will say, okay, you know what, we're going to package up some training data and we're going to license this to a research organization who is not going to become our competitor, or something along that. If you can't, sell something to someone who can. Keep your business alive. You need that blood of revenue flowing through your company's veins. Okay, selling to pre-market companions. There are many different organizations that have done this successfully. They do this all the time. I recommend that you consider, first of all, those that are not looking to commercialize something that may run against you in the future. That would be tragic. And academic institutions, research organizations tend to be at the top of that list. You know, hire a good legal team, think it through calmly, but this can be a great way to develop passive recurring revenue. There can be mutual benefits that go along with this. You could have shared IP that generates out of it, and it might tie you up for 3 years. It might give you huge benefits for 3 to 5. We don't know. Do seriously consider this. Lazarus 3D, I encourage you to look them up. Maybe reach out to them. If you'd like an introduction, please let me know. But they created scanning equipment to scan individual organs and then turned around pre-market while they waited for FDA approval and sold the information they had created and structured to other research organizations to bring in recurring revenue, which completely changed the dynamic of leverage with their investors because they were already bringing in revenue. Guideline number 2. Okay, guys, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but once again, take screenshots and follow up with me afterwards. I'll be happy to share more. Adjust your product pitch from an investment narrative. In other words, look at this. This is not just the story you're telling your investors. Look at this the way your investors are evaluating it. Focus on them. I mentioned earlier, they're looking at how this fits in their portfolio. They're looking at their time. If they want to be out in 7 years, they want all of their money back and more, then that's very important if you're not going to be making them money in 7 years or 4 years or 2 years or whatever that may be. You need to understand how the investors are going to go through due diligence, what they're going to look at first, whether it's a good fit for them. And this second point here, how will we make money on this company? How likely is that to exit is really at the forefront of our mind when we look at a new deal. Is this plausible? What do we need to do to help make this more likely? What is the next thing that is going to kill me? So if you're looking at how a deal may or may not come together, please evaluate due diligence processes within angel networks, which can be varied and go from very deep, very light. You need to look into Series A investors or even Series B, because scaling, again, is a very different risk evaluation and product fit within a portfolio. What is the next thing that is going to kill me is very useful when you're looking at, does your risk fit exactly where everyone else's does? And this can be a very different type of conversation. So for instance, we have a company called Transformative AI. Again, I encourage you to look them up. They've done fantastic work in cardiac arrest testing and knowing when in advance, predicting through AI a cardiac arrest is going to occur. We had to change their entire model from trying to sell direct to hospitals through an agnostic platform in which their AI sent, which was very clever. But of course, I've mentioned there's a lot of friction to actually selling directly at hospitals. And there are many nuances that were going to tie up their capital in between to selling towards the manufacturers of the telemetry machines on which the software would set. This is the sort of process where a good investor, a good angel investor, a good portfolio services like Venture Atlas Labs can help you look at this and say, your technology is great, but this is going to coincide with so many other issues. The investors are never going to be able to make money on it, and you're going to far exceed the runway that you currently have to actually be able to sell this. We need to tweak your model. This is perfectly great. Transformative has done much better with their Series A and a lot of non-dilutive funding. They've been wildly successful. They're a brilliant team. But they needed to work through that model for all of those things to occur. These are the conversations that you can expect to have when you start getting into due diligence with your investors. So take that narrative and say, you know what, here's our current business model, here are the mechanics, here's how this is going to work for you, and here's how we're really confident you can get your money back. We're going to exit in 7 years at the latest. And here's why we think that. Always include that. Here's why we think that. So show up wisely. This is the third guideline. Find your advocate. When you reach out to me on LinkedIn and you say, hey, I would love to apply for SWAN's quarterly funding round. I heard that you're an angel network. That's brilliant. You're focused on social impact and for good companies. So are we. Here's how we help patients. Here's why we would be a perfect fit for you. Then that makes me your advocate within our organization. And the same thing for any LP you may reach out to, any business analyst that's fresh out of B school who's sitting there crunching numbers for investors. You want to know who your advocate is going to be and empower them to advocate for you, so you are not just going into the boardroom saying, oh, this guy looked you up on LinkedIn, I don't know him. You don't want that dynamic. Understand whether a network passes on you, a fund passes on you. They may be interested later on when you're wildly successful and say, wow, I was wrong. He looked me up on LinkedIn. I guess I should have taken him seriously. These are long-term partnerships, and take care of your advocates, because those are the people who are going to defend you after you've left the boardroom. They're the people who are going to dive into your due diligence, and those are the people who are going to help lift you up through that additionality better than just a check could. If you are looking around for funding, please think through what is important other than just the money. You will find specialist VCs who may have a great portfolio of similar technologies for you. They may understand, wow, this is really super important, because they understand the nuances of MR technologies. They understand, the war against CT machines, for instance. Whereas someone who's just generally in healthcare may not really understand why your valuation is so high or why you're so confident. Find your specialist. Find someone who understands why IoT is going to change the world, or why remote telemonitoring is complicated but very interesting for all of these reasons, because those are the VCs, those are the LPs, those are the angel investors who are going to be able to say, you know what, I know these 3 guys who could completely change your world. Let's get them on the phone right now. Don't dilute your USP trying to make all of this work for everyone, because those investors may be great backseat investors, but I encourage you to find out how you can uplift their portfolio, and in the same breath say, hey, this is really why we want you. You have this expertise. We really respect that. We know that's difficult to get. You have this deep specialization, and we believe you can help us make our company more successful sooner. Visibility has to be targeted. So if you are doing an investment tour, you are hitting the road, you are querying people on LinkedIn, you're applying to pitch competitions, you're going through accelerators, you're trying to get all those logos on your website as soon as possible, please do not become an investment tourist. We want to see progress. We want to see that there is intentions behind the type of relationships that you are building, the way that you are spending your time. You cannot just become a hobbyist through every accelerator that will have you. So please think about, some intentionality of how you're spending your time, because most of all, investors want to know that you are running your company and that you are making progress in your company, regardless of what your position is, whether you're the CEO or the CTO, you have an outsourced development team, you have an outsourced business team, whatever that may be. We need to know that you're in charge of that and not just attending classes, seminars, or conferences. It's good that you do those things, but make sure you're reaching out. This is a specialist fund. This is a specialist organization. We are brilliant, at getting our technology together. We're terrible at these coding languages, so we brought in specialists, and we're terrible at market research, so we brought in these guys. That is a fantastic conversation. The same way you want to build that up with your investors, like, we really appreciate these things about you. And the biggest part that is useful to you there is that these investors are much more likely to not just add additionality, but actually put that sweat equity into your company. Go where the scouts are looking. There are innovation scouts everywhere. This is one reason why you want to go to conferences, or why you would want to attend a virtual summit like the one you are currently participating in, because there are innovation scouts from hospitals, from major IDNs, from corporate ventures, from angel networks like me, or from venture capital firms, and those of us who help support them. And they're saying, this is brilliant. That person is very smart. I would love to hear more from them. Go where they are looking. Be intentional and know who you're speaking to. Please, this is why things like LinkedIn exist. Look them up and see what function they have, who their partners are. Are they kind of in this sort of neighborhood and they help in this way? And be respectful of that. Spend time figuring out how you can contribute to them, what they're looking for, what kind of deals they're looking for. It may be something like, hey, I met you at this conference. We just had a brief conversation. Here's why I think my company may be a good fit for you. And also, I have 3 more. They're my great friends. They're adjacent to my technologies. We're not working on anything competitively, but I think all of us actually may be really good fits for you. And that's a different kind of conversation that can be very interesting to innovation scouts. You're making their life easier. In terms of cold calling, going back through, looking people up on LinkedIn, networking at events like this, not every person in a angel network, in a VC fund, in a portfolio services company, or within corporate ventures is the right person for you to be speaking to. If you do meet someone, you can always say, hey, I'm looking for this. This is why it's urgent. This is why it's really interesting. Would you be willing to give me an introduction? I'm happy to speak with you first and assure you that I'm not a crazy person off of the street. That works really well. Oh, one important thing I do want to mention. Easy call to action. If you can say all of this in like 140 characters, who you are, what you want, why it's useful for us, and what your call to action is, excellent. If you send a 60-page slide deck to us every time someone's going to be tired, they're not going to want to do that work. They may take a call with you, 15-minute conversation with you, but don't make your investors, your potential investors especially, do work to get a meeting with you. You will have a much greater success rate if you do not. And remember, this is a relationship business. So the people you meet today, the speakers you get to speak with, the other participants, this is a relationship business. And just because something may not come out for you today or tomorrow or next week, doesn't mean that these won't be incredibly valuable connections for you in a year or two. Everything changes. People move from different organizations. Investors change theses. And these investors do need to know you for a very long time. Like I said, they may be in this for 7 years if you're an angel network. It may be 12 years if you're Series A. So this is an interesting dynamic, because if you think about how much everything may have changed for you in the last decade of your life, that's how long you want to grow these connections, deepen these connections, find out who resonates with you, because that's the way investors are looking. Do I need to know this person? Are they reliable? Are they consistent for the next decade or more of my life? That's a big commitment. I do want to emphasize here, sometimes you have cultural nuances about replying to emails, about being too eager, about waiting a long time and thinking that you're cool. Investors don't care. If we feel like you're playing different, funds against each other, we know there's a lot of competition, but we still want to feel like we're your favorite. It does not look desperate. Reply consistently, reply on the weekends. I know that seems like horrible life balance advice, but if we're working on the weekend, we certainly are reaching out to you because we care, and you don't want to lose that momentum because Monday morning we may be distracted again. This is the only rule. You'll notice so far you've had 3 guidelines. This is the one rule. Persevere unrelentingly towards your goal. You need to be flexible. I've mentioned a couple of times thinking about your pivot points, your risk, where your different permutations may be, because the company you have now is certainly not the company that you'll have in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Maybe you've exited, maybe you've added new products, maybe you've fired half of your team and hired a new one with completely different skills. And maybe it's wildly successful, maybe it's a completely different venture. Everything changes, and that is okay. That is part of your story. That is part of the narrative you build in with investors, because if you persevere, you will continue to be able to refine what success looks like, how you're going to get there. You will get more information, and that will continue to help you uplift their portfolio and be that consistent, reliable force of, hey, man, all of us get knocked down sometimes. A pandemic comes out, something changes, we need to renegotiate prices, reimbursement just fell through for us. All of these things happen. How you gauge them, how you build out your decisions is very critical. Flexibility is not considered a weakness in this world. Knowing how you're going to get there and being resilient along the way is the practice that is so, so critical. So think about being flexible, think about your risks, acknowledge them, build out decision-making criteria internally and externally, how you will share this, and show up, show your work, lean in, and bring together your team around your new product, your new venture, why it works with these investment partners, and you will have more success. As I mentioned, the environment is fantastic right now. Everything is in your favor more than it was 2 years ago for fundraising. If you would like to learn more about Venture Atlas Labs, I've got a couple of call to actions for you. You can reach out to me on my email. This is my email right here, and I will reply to you usually within several days. We are here to give you candid ad hoc advice. So we are management consultants. We work with venture capitalists, private equity companies, corporate ventures, but we also work with entrepreneurs like you. So we do have a program in which you can hire us for an hour or two, and we will just tell you what we know. Candid, openly, perspectives on something, some insights around different market forces, procurement forces, figuring out distribution, licensing deals. We know that entrepreneurs need information, and you may be in do-it-yourself mode, particularly if you're fundraising. That's okay. We are here to help. If you would like more information about actual concrete commercialization services and navigating those things, we are, of course, available for bigger projects and to make ourselves useful to you. But again, if you would like a candid conversation or a workshop, we have half-day programs that will teach you and empower you to do market research and to do the things that you need to do to set yourself up with investors and partners for success. If you are fundraising and you are in that earlier space I mentioned between your seed and your Series A, please connect with SWAN Impact. We do invest on a quarterly basis, which means that our next application deadline is January 3rd. So you have time to fundraise with other investors. You have time to refine your investment narrative. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, but you can find more at this URL and get more information about our typical check size and how our due diligence process works. Work through the steps that I outlined for you. And if you are a social impact organization, regardless of sector or specific nuance within healthcare, we'd love to hear from you. The only things that we don't don't fund are available on the website, so you can look through the entire process. And again, feel free to reach out to me. If you are looking for your Series A, there's exciting news here. So this is the SWAN Impact Angel Network. We are also launching our very first VC fund in January. So if you are on the Series A side already, we would also love to talk to you. And you can find out more information on the website as well.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. This has been so insightful, excellent guidelines, and just the investor perspective is invaluable. On my radio show, Leading the Way Today, years ago, I got the chance to interview Mark Cuban, who's the famous celebrity investor on the Shark Tank television show, that popular show. And I will tell you, he said exactly what you are saying. Know your market, know your customer, know your demographic. I think that's the biggest challenge when you're having a startup company. So you shared some really good information today. Thank you so much for being part of Healthtech Summit. And we wish you continued success in all that you do.
Thank you, Angel. I apologize for going over, but if anyone has questions, you guys know how to find me. So looking forward to participating in the rest of the day, and good luck.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good luck to you.